I never expected to fall in love because of rain. Lubbock's spring thunderstorms were vicious things, sudden, violent, and completely unforgiving to those caught unprepared. Like me, my last client had been particularly difficult, a middle-aged man whose wife had died 3 months ago. He'd sobbed against my shoulder for the entire 45-minute session, and by the time I walked out of my office building, I was emotionally drained and blind to the dark clouds gathering overhead. The first fat raindrop hit my nose as I reached the crosswalk. The second and third followed immediately, and within seconds the sky opened up like someone had upended a cosmic bathtub. My blonde hair was plastered to my skull before I could even curse. "Here." The voice came from beside me, accompanied by the blessed relief of rain no longer pounding my head. I turned to find a woman holding an enormous black umbrella over both of us. "You look like you need this more than I do." I stared at her, water dripping from my eyelashes. She was slightly shorter than me, with striking red hair pulled back in a loose bun, and the most arresting green eyes I'd ever seen. Her outfit, tailored slacks and a fitted blazer, spoke of a professional life that probably didn't involve hugging strangers for a living. "I'm already soaked," I managed, attempting to step away. But she matched my movement, keeping me under the shelter. "But you'll get even more soaked without it," she countered, lips quirking up at one corner. "I'm Juliana." "Hope," I replied, wiping water from my face. "Hope Barnes, professional hugger at your service." Her eyebrows shot up. "You're joking." "Therapeutic embrace specialist, if we're being fancy," I clarified, used to the reaction. "It's a real thing." The light changed, and we crossed the street together, this stranger and I, huddled awkwardly under her umbrella. Our hands brushed as we both reached to adjust the handle, and I felt an unexpected jolt that had nothing to do with the lightning flashing overhead. "There's a coffee shop right there," she pointed. "Want to wait out the storm? I could use a warm drink." 20 minutes later, we were sitting across from each other in a booth by the window, steam rising from oversized mugs while rain lashed the glass. I'd learned that Dr. Juliana Hall was an autism specialist who worked with adults on the spectrum, helping them navigate social situations and workplace challenges. "So where's your office?" she asked, blowing ripples across her latte. "The Parkview Medical Building on 8th, I replied. "Second floor, end of the hall." Her eyes widened. "You're kidding. I'm on the 3rd floor. How have we never run into each other?" "I take the west stairwell," I shrugged, feeling strangely light. "Sounds like you must take the east." "The universe kept us apart until we were properly soaked," she laughed, and the sound did something warm to my chest. Her fingers drummed lightly on the table, elegant and restless. "Well, now that we've met," I found myself saying, "would you like a professional demonstration?" She tilted her head. "Of hugging?" "It's what I do best," I said with a wink that surprised even me. I wasn't usually this forward with strangers, but something about her green eyes made me bold. To my delight, she stood up. For science, I suppose. I rose and stepped around the table. Most people go with a standard frontal embrace, but that creates chest-to-chest contact that can feel too intimate for first-timers. "And what do you recommend instead?" Her voice had dropped half an octave. I moved closer, my body still faintly damp. "Turn slightly," I instructed, positioning her at a gentle angle before wrapping my arms around her shoulders. Her hair smelled like rosemary and rain. I meant it to be brief, professional, but something happened when our bodies connected. Her hand came to rest at the small of my back, and I felt her sigh against my neck. For just a moment, I forgot this was a demonstration. I forgot we were in a public coffee shop. I forgot everything except the feeling of Juliana Hall in my arms, and the insane urge to turn my head just slightly and press my lips against her temple. When we finally pulled apart, her cheeks were flushed, and I knew mine were too. "That was," she started. "On the house," I finished, heart pounding as thunder cracked outside. "There's nothing wrong with what you do," my friend Zoe insisted over lunch the following week. "People need human touch. It's scientific." I stabbed at my salad, unconvinced. Try explaining that to the doctor who asked if I provide happy endings yesterday. Or to my brother who thinks I'm one step away from joining a hippie commune. Being a professional hugger sounds quirky and fun until you're trying to be taken seriously in a medical building full of people with advanced degrees. Most days, I weathered the sidelong glances and whispered comments with professional grace. Today wasn't one of those days. "Speaking of doctors," I continued, trying to sound casual, I met one during that thunderstorm last week, works in my building, autism specialist. Zoe's eyebrows shot up. Male or female? Female, I said, suddenly very interested in a cherry tomato. Juliana Hall. And? Zoe leaned forward, knowing me too well. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hope, it's Juliana from the rainstorm. Got your number from building directory. Would you consider speaking at my clinic about therapeutic touch for autistic adults? No pressure. Coffee first to discuss? My heart did a ridiculous little stutter. I showed Zoe the message. Well, damn, she grinned. Somebody made an impression. 3 days later, I found myself in Juliana's office, surrounded by sensory tools, fidget objects, and surprisingly comfortable furniture. She'd tied her red hair back in a loose braid that fell over one shoulder, and wore a soft-looking emerald sweater that made her eyes even more striking. Many autistic adults struggle with touch aversion, she explained, leaning forward in her chair. But touch is vital for mental health. Some of my clients haven't been hugged in years. That's where structured, consensual touch comes in, I nodded. Clear boundaries, predictable pressure, no surprises. Her eyes lit up. Exactly. Would you consider doing a workshop? Nothing too fancy, just explaining what you do and maybe some demonstrations with willing participants. I'd love to, I said, meaning it. But I should warn you, some people don't take my work seriously. Juliana's expression hardened. Anyone who dismisses therapeutic touch hasn't read the research. I've seen clients make breakthroughs after months of stagnation just because someone held their hand correctly. Her passionate defense warmed something in me. For years, I'd battled skepticism about my career choice. My own family still introduced me as Hope, who used to work in marketing rather than acknowledge what I actually did. The day of the presentation arrived faster than I expected. Standing before Juliana's team and several high-functioning autistic adults, I felt an unfamiliar nervousness. This mattered. She mattered. Touch is a language, I began. And like any language, it can be overwhelming if you don't understand the grammar. Today, we're going to learn some basic sentences. For 90 minutes, I demonstrated pressure techniques, boundary setting, and the various types of therapeutic embrace. Juliana volunteered frequently, her clinical objectivity slipping whenever our skin connected. During a demonstration of palm-to-palm grounding, our fingers interlaced, and I swore I could feel her pulse jump. The goal isn't to push beyond comfort zones, I explained to the group, while very aware of Juliana's proximity. It's to create a safe space where touch becomes possible. After the presentation, several participants approached with questions. One man in his 40s tearfully thanked me, saying it was the first time anyone had explained touch in a way that didn't make him feel broken. Juliana beamed from across the room. When the last person left, she closed the door and leaned against it. That was incredible, she said softly. You're incredible. Just doing my job, I replied, though my voice sounded unsteady even to me. No, she shook her head. What you do, it's more than a job, it's a gift. Our eyes locked across the room. The air between us seemed to vibrate with something unnamed but powerful. I wanted to cross that space, to touch her in ways that had nothing to do with professional demonstration and everything to do with the way my body hummed whenever she was near. Instead, I busied myself packing up my materials, afraid of what might happen if I acknowledged the electricity arcing between us. Whatever this was, it felt too important to rush, too precious to risk. Dinner? Juliana asked suddenly. To thank you properly for today. I looked up, caught the hopeful vulnerability in her expression, and knew I was already falling too fast. I'd like that, I said simply, and her answering smile lit up the room. The letter sat on my kitchen counter like a ticking bomb. Notice of rent increase and lease termination option. The building where I both lived and worked was being upscaled, which was landlord speak for we're kicking out small businesses to make room for luxury condos. I had 30 days to either accept a 40% rent increase or vacate. I did the math again, hoping the numbers would somehow change. They didn't. Even if I doubled my client load and worked 7 days a week, I couldn't afford the new rent. 6 years of building my practice, gone because some developer decided Lubbock needed more overpriced apartments. My phone rang. Juliana. We'd fallen into a comfortable routine over the past few weeks, meeting for lunch or coffee between clients. Nothing more had happened since that charged moment after the presentation. But something was building between us, slow and sweet and terrifying. Hey you, I answered, trying to sound normal. Hope? Are you okay? Damn her perceptiveness. Just landlord troubles, I sighed. Nothing I can't handle. I'm coming over, she said, and hung up before I could protest. 20 minutes later, she was at my door with takeout and wine. I couldn't help but notice the dark circles under her eyes, as if she hadn't been sleeping well. Spill it, she commanded once we were settled on my couch, food between us, so I told her about the notice, about the likelihood I'd have to move back to my hometown 4 hours away, about starting over from scratch. That's awful, she said, squeezing my hand. Would moving to a different space here in Lubbock work? I shook my head. Commercial spaces with the right zoning are beyond my budget, and I need somewhere professional clients feel comfortable. Not everyone wants hugs in someone's spare bedroom. Juliana bit her lip, seeming distracted. I have problems too, she finally admitted. Remember that research grant I mentioned? It's been announced. The one for developing new autism therapies? That's great. It's $300,000, she said quietly. Enough to fund my research for years, publish results, maybe even write a book. It would change everything. I felt a surge of happiness for her. Juliana's work was groundbreaking. She deserved this recognition. So what's the problem? She took a large gulp of wine. The Crawford Foundation only awards to researchers with stable personal lives to ensure project completion. They specifically favor married applicants. That's archaic, I frowned. And possibly illegal, but they word it carefully. Juliana looked miserable. My department chair pulled me aside today. He said, my application is the strongest they've ever seen, but as a single woman, I'm at a significant disadvantage. That's ridiculous. Your relationship status has nothing to do with your research abilities. Tell that to the 80-year-old conservative billionaire who funds the grant, she snorted. The deadline is in 3 weeks, and according to office gossip, the other finalist is a married father of 3. I refilled our glasses, my own problems temporarily forgotten. So what are you going to do? She stared into her wine for a long moment. Marcus Weber in the psychology department offered a solution. We get married on paper. I get the grant. He gets to list himself as co-researcher. We divorce quietly after the funding period. Something cold and unpleasant twisted in my stomach at the thought of Juliana marrying anyone, even as a business arrangement. Who is this Marcus guy? Nice enough. Divorced last year. Desperate for publishing credits. She looked up at me, eyes conflicted. It's crazy, right? Completely unethical. Completely, I agreed, though a small part of me wondered if I'd do the same in her position. The thing is, she continued softly, this research could help thousands of people. It's not just about my career. These are techniques I've developed over 10 years that could change lives. Does the means justify the end? I didn't have an answer. We sat in silence, both facing impossible choices about our futures. The wine bottle emptied as we talked through options, each more desperate than the last. By midnight, we'd solved nothing, but somehow the burden felt lighter for being shared. As she gathered her things to leave, Juliana turned to me suddenly. What if you didn't have to move back home? Unless I win the lottery in the next month, I don't see alternatives. We could figure something out, she said, her expression intense. Together. She hugged me goodbye at the door, and unlike the dozens of professional embraces I gave daily, this one carried weight and promise and something dangerously close to need. Her hands lingered at my waist, and for a breathless moment, I thought she might kiss me. Instead, she stepped back, our unspoken feelings hovering between us like smoke. Don't make any decisions yet, were her parting words. Promise me. I nodded, watching her walk away, wondering how two people with such different problems could feel so inexplicably connected by them. I hadn't expected to dislike Marcus on sight. He was objectively handsome in an academic way, tall, with dark-rimmed glasses and a carefully trimmed beard. He had a pleasant laugh and good table manners. By all accounts, I should have found him perfectly agreeable. Instead, I watched him pull out Juliana's chair at the restaurant, with a hot spike of something I didn't want to name lodged in my chest. So Hope, Juliana tells me you're a professional hugger, he said, after we'd ordered drinks. His tone wasn't condescending, which only made it harder to justify my instant animosity. Therapeutic embrace specialist, Juliana corrected before I could. She just did an amazing workshop for my clients. Marcus nodded, seeming genuinely interested. Physical touch as therapy has fascinating neurological implications. Have you published any research on your methods? The conversation flowed easily enough, but I caught every small touch, his hand briefly on Juliana's arm, her shoulder bumping his when she laughed. Each one felt like a paper cut. They looked good together, I had to admit. Both educated, articulate, passionate about their fields. If their marriage was going to be fake, they certainly could fool anyone watching. So you two are really going through with this? I asked when Juliana excused herself to the restroom. Marcus studied me carefully. It's a means to an end. The research deserves to be funded, and if checking a box on a form makes that happen. He shrugged. Besides, I like Juliana. We respect each other. Some real marriages are built on less. That's what troubled me most as I drove home alone. Their fake marriage made perfect logical sense. It was a clean solution to a complex problem. So why did it feel like I was losing something I never even had? My phone jolted me awake at 2:17 a.m., 3 nights later. Juliana's name flashed on the screen. I need you. Her voice was tight with stress. Nathan is having a meltdown at his apartment. He trusts you from the workshop. Please. I was dressed and in my car within minutes. Nathan was one of Juliana's higher functioning clients, a 30-year-old software engineer who'd only recently been diagnosed with autism. When I arrived at his apartment complex, Juliana was outside, hugging herself against the night chill. Thank God, she breathed when she saw me. He's been having sensory overload for hours. Construction next door started early and broke his routine. He won't let me touch him, but he mentioned your techniques. Inside, Nathan was rocking in a corner, hands over his ears. I approached slowly, keeping my movements predictable. Nathan, it's Hope Barnes. I'm going to sit over here, okay? You can come to me if you want help getting regulated. It took 45 minutes of patient waiting, but eventually he crawled to me like a wounded animal and allowed me to apply the deep pressure holds I'd taught in the workshop. Another 30 minutes, and he was calm enough to take the medication Juliana offered, before falling into exhausted sleep on his couch. We tiptoed out, both drained. In the hallway, Juliana collapsed against me, trembling. Hey, I murmured, holding her upright. He's okay now. You're okay. I should have been able to help him, she whispered against my neck. What kind of specialist am I if I can't? Stop, I said firmly, pulling back to look at her. You knew exactly what he needed and who to call. That's being a good doctor. Her face crumpled then, professional composure finally breaking. I guided her to my car, drove us to my apartment, and sat her on my couch with a blanket while I made tea. When I returned, she had curled into herself, looking small and vulnerable. This is why I need that grant, she said after taking a sip, to develop protocols for crisis intervention, to train more people to do what you did tonight. I sat beside her, our shoulders touching. Your work matters, Juliana. Whatever it takes to make it happen, I support you. She turned to look at me then, something raw and unguarded in her expression. Even if it means marrying someone I don't love? The air between us thickened. I reached up without thinking, pushing a strand of red hair behind her ear. Her breath caught as my fingers grazed her cheek. Is there... Her voice was barely audible. Is there someone you love, Hope? Time suspended as we faced each other on my shabby couch at 3 a.m. All the careful boundaries we'd constructed crumbled under the weight of her question. I leaned forward, drawn by something I couldn't fight anymore, and she met me halfway. Our lips brushed, tentatively at first, then with growing certainty. Her hand came up to cup my face as the kiss deepened, and I felt myself falling into her like I'd been waiting my whole life for this moment. She tasted like mint tea and possibility, and I couldn't get enough. When we finally broke apart, her eyes were wide with wonder and alarm. I can't. She started, then stopped, pressing her fingers to her lips as if to hold on to the feeling. I know, I whispered, though my body screamed otherwise. The grant, Marcus. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. This complicates everything. It was already complicated, I admitted, taking her hand. From the first day in the rain, we sat there holding hands until dawn broke, neither of us brave enough to take the next step, neither willing to step back. My landlord's final notice arrived with cruel timing, exactly 1 week after Juliana and I had almost changed everything. We'd been careful since that night, maintaining a friendship that crackled with unacknowledged tension. Every touch was charged, every glance loaded with meaning we weren't ready to confront. I sat cross-legged on my living room floor, surrounded by apartment listings from towns I'd never considered living in. Each option represented a different kind of surrender. Moving back home isn't the end of the world, I told my reflection as I brushed my teeth that night. The lie tasted bitter. Moving meant leaving my clients, my friends, the life I'd built. It meant leaving Juliana just when I'd found her. The knock at my door came as I was tossing rental applications into the recycling bin. Juliana stood in the hallway, clutching her laptop. "I've been thinking," she said, brushing past me into the apartment. Her nervous energy filled the small space. "I have a proposal." I gestured for her to continue, not trusting my voice after a day of fighting tears. "What if," she began, pacing my living room, "what if you married Marcus instead of me?" "What?" The word came out as a squeak. "Hear me out," she rushed on. "Marcus needs the research credit but doesn't actually care who his paper wife is. You need housing security. The grant comes with a housing stipend for the primary researcher and spouse." I stared at her, unable to process the suggestion. "You want me to marry your fake husband?" "It solves everything," she insisted. "You could stay in Lubbock, we'd all benefit financially, and—" She hesitated. "We wouldn't have to watch each other marry someone else." The last part hung in the air between us. I sank onto the couch, mind reeling. "Juliana, that's insane." "Is it? People marry for green cards, for health insurance, for tax benefits. How is this different?" I tried to imagine introducing Marcus as my husband, sharing an address, coordinating our stories. "It's fraud," I pointed out weakly. "So is what Marcus and I were planning," she countered, sitting beside me. "But this way, you don't have to leave." I looked at her, brilliant, ethical Juliana suggesting something so outrageous, all to keep me near. The realization made my chest ache. "I'll think about it," I finally said, not knowing what else to offer. 2 days later, I found myself in a bridal shop with Juliana, ostensibly to discuss her proposal further. Somehow we'd ended up among the sample dresses, the shop assistant mistaking us for a couple. "Just try one on," Juliana urged with a mischievous smile. "When else do you get to wear $1,000 dresses for free?" "This is ridiculous," I laughed, but allowed myself to be guided toward the fitting rooms with an armful of ivory silk. The dress fit surprisingly well, a simple sheath that skimmed my body before flaring gently at the knees. When I stepped out, Juliana's playful expression vanished. "Hope," she breathed, eyes tracing every inch of me. "Too much?" I asked, suddenly self-conscious. She shook her head slowly. "You're beautiful." The shop assistant appeared with a veil, but Juliana waved her away. "Can we have a moment?" When we were alone, she stepped behind me to adjust the zipper. I felt her warm breath on my neck, her fingers trailing down my spine as she secured the fastening. Every nerve ending in my body ignited at her touch. "If this were real," she whispered, her hands coming to rest on my shoulders. "If this were us." I turned to face her, our bodies inches apart. "If this were us, what?" Her eyes dropped to my lips, then back up. The longing in her gaze matched the ache building inside me. She leaned forward slightly, and my eyes fluttered closed in anticipation. The fitting room curtain swooshed open as another customer entered the adjacent booth, breaking the spell. Juliana stepped back, her face flushed. "We should go," she said quietly. Outside, we walked in silence until we reached her car. "This plan is crazy," I finally said. "I can't marry Marcus." "I know," she admitted, leaning against the driver's door. I can't stand the thought of you leaving." "And I can't stand the thought of you marrying anyone," I confessed. "Even for show." Our eyes met, the truth finally spoken aloud. She reached for my hand, interlacing our fingers. "Then we need a different plan," she said firmly. "Something that doesn't involve either of us in a fake marriage." "What if there isn't one?" She squeezed my hand. "There is. We just haven't found it yet." I wanted to believe her, that we could find a path forward that didn't sacrifice her career or uproot my life, that whatever was growing between us deserved a chance to flourish without deception. "Promise me something," I said as we parted. "No decisions about Marcus until we've exhausted every other option." She nodded, her smile tinged with sadness and hope. "I promise." Time was running out. With 1 week until both the grant deadline and my eviction date, desperation hung over us like a storm cloud. I'd agreed to meet Marcus for coffee, alone, to discuss Juliana's outlandish proposal. My stomach knotted as I spotted him at a corner table, typing furiously on his laptop. "Hope," he greeted, standing as I approached. "Thanks for coming." I nodded, ordering a black coffee to match my mood. When the barista stepped away, Marcus closed his laptop with a decisive click. "I need to be straight with you," he said, leaning forward. "This arrangement Juliana suggested, I can't do it." Relief flooded through me. Thank goodness. I was dreading having to turn you down. He looked surprised, then chuckled. "Not because I have anything against you. Quite the opposite, actually." "What do you mean?" "I've developed feelings for you, Hope." His earnest expression made my heart sink. "These past few weeks, getting to know you. You're extraordinary. Your compassion, your dedication to helping others. I find myself thinking about you constantly." I stared at him, speechless. This was the last thing I'd expected. "If we got married, even on paper, I couldn't guarantee I'd want to keep it that way," he continued. "And that wouldn't be fair to anyone." "Marcus, I'm flattered, but—" "You're in love with Juliana," he finished gently. The words hanging in the air made my breath catch. I hadn't admitted it aloud to anyone, not even myself. But hearing him say it, the simple truth of it, broke something open inside me. "Is it that obvious?" I whispered. "Only to someone watching carefully," he replied. "And I've been watching. The way you look at her when she speaks. How you always position yourself near her in a room. It's the same way I've started looking at you." Shame and guilt twisted through me. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," he said with a sad smile. "We can't control who we fall for. Believe me, I've tried." After an awkward goodbye, I walked aimlessly through downtown, my thoughts chaotic. Marcus's confession had complicated everything further, and the clock was still ticking on all our problems. That evening, Juliana called in a panic. The foundation sent someone to interview me tomorrow. Some representative to get to know the finalists before making their decision. That's good, right? You can impress them in person. "They specifically asked to meet my partner as well," she said, her voice tight. "Marcus just called to back out completely. He says he can't go through with any of it." My heart sank. "Did he tell you why?" "No, just that it was too complicated now." She sounded on the verge of tears. "Hope, what am I going to do? This is my one chance." Without thinking through the consequences, I blurted, "I'll do it." "What?" "I'll pretend to be with Marcus. The foundation doesn't know what he looks like, right? Just say your fiancé couldn't make it, but your close friend, who happens to be living with you, could." Her silence told me she was actually considering my insane suggestion. The next afternoon found me sitting beside Juliana in her immaculate office, clasping her hand as though we'd been together for years. Mr. Patterson from the Crawford Foundation, a stern man with wire-rimmed glasses, scrutinized us over his notepad. "And how long have you two been together?" he asked. 8 months, Juliana answered confidently. We'd rehearsed our story for hours. "Living together already?" His eyebrow arched disapprovingly. "When you know," I said, squeezing her hand. The irony of speaking my truth while living a lie wasn't lost on me. For 90 excruciating minutes, we maintained the charade. I spoke glowingly of Juliana's work, described our fictional first date, and even showed him the key to our apartment on my keychain. With each lie, I watched Juliana's professional demeanor fracture slightly, guilt shadowing her eyes. When Patterson finally left, promising a decision within days, we collapsed onto her office couch in exhausted silence. "I can't believe we did that," she whispered. "We did what we had to do," I replied hollowly. She turned to me suddenly, green eyes blazing. "No, we didn't. We had a choice, and we chose lies." "Juliana, I saw your face when you talked about supporting my dreams, about building a life together. None of that was acting." Her voice shook. "And this, us pretending, hiding what we really feel, it's wrong." Before I could respond, she moved toward me with startling purpose, one hand gripping my shoulder as she pressed me back against the wall. "I'm tired of pretending," she breathed, inches from my face. Then her lips were on mine, urgent and demanding. This wasn't the cautious, questioning kiss we'd shared before. This was revelation and declaration, her body pressing into mine as though she could eliminate any space between us. I responded with equal fervor, hands tangling in her hair, months of longing finally finding expression. I love you, she gasped when we broke for air. I've tried not to, tried to be sensible, but I can't do it anymore. My heart soared even as reality crashed around us. What about the grant? Your research? I'll find another way, she said fiercely, but I won't lie about us anymore. I can't let you do this, I said the next morning, setting a cup of coffee in front of Juliana at my kitchen table. We'd spent the night talking until exhaustion claimed us both. Her on the bed, me on the couch, still maintaining some boundary despite our confessions. You've worked too hard for this opportunity. The foundation will call today, she said, staring into her mug. I already emailed them withdrawing my application. You what? My coffee sloshed over the rim as I set it down too forcefully. Juliana, no. It was built on lies, she said simply. That's not how I want to succeed. I paced my small kitchen, frustration building. So what happens now? To your research, your career? Her shoulders slumped slightly. I don't know. Back to grant applications, I suppose. Smaller funding opportunities. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on me. She'd sacrificed her big break because of her feelings for me, because she couldn't maintain the lie anymore. How long before resentment took root? I should call Marcus, I said suddenly. Explain everything, apologize. I already did, she admitted. He was understanding. An uncomfortable silence fell between us. We'd confessed our feelings, but reality hadn't changed. My eviction notice still sat on the counter, her career setback was still fresh, and we were two women who'd known each other barely 2 months, facing impossible choices. I need to cancel my clients today, I said finally. Start packing. Her head snapped up. You're still leaving? I don't have a choice, Juliana. My landlord isn't going to extend my lease because we finally admitted we have feelings for each other. Move in with me, she blurted. What? Temporarily, she clarified, cheeks flushing. Until you find another place. My apartment has a spare room. The offer tempted me beyond words, but caution won out. We'd be rushing things. Feelings are running high right now, but in a week or a month. This isn't impulse, she interrupted. I've known how I felt about you since that first hug in the coffee shop. My heart stuttered, but practicality kept me grounded. And what happens when you resent me for the grant? When you're struggling for funding and remember you had it in your grasp? That's not fair, she protested. It was my choice. Influenced by me. By us. She stood abruptly, grabbing her jacket. I need some air, some time to think. I watched her leave, wondering if I'd just ruined the one bright spot in my crumbling life. 3 days passed in a blur of packing boxes and tearful goodbyes to clients. Juliana and I exchanged brief texts, but nothing substantial. The distance felt necessary but painful, like setting a broken bone. On my final night in the apartment, rain pounded against the windows in an echo of the day we'd met. Most of my belongings were already in storage or packed into my car for the drive back to my hometown the next morning. The knock startled me. Opening the door revealed Juliana, soaked to the skin just as she'd been that first day. Forgot your umbrella again? I attempted humor, my voice catching. On purpose this time, she said, water dripping from her hair onto my threshold. I wanted to remind you how we started. I stepped aside to let her in, acutely aware of my barren apartment, mattress on the floor, single lamp casting long shadows. I've been thinking about what you said, she began, hugging herself against the chill, about resentment, about rushing. My chest tightened, preparing for goodbye. You were right, she continued. We should be cautious. This is new, and we're both in unstable situations. I nodded, though each word felt like a small wound. But hope, her voice softened as she stepped closer. Sometimes life doesn't give you the luxury of perfect timing. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating her determined expression. I received a call today, she said, from the Autism Research Consortium in Dallas. They want me to lead a pilot program, fully funded, no marriage requirements. Juliana, that's amazing. It's a 2-year position, she continued. I'd have to relocate. The brief spark of joy extinguished. Of course. Just when we'd found each other, distance would separate us. When do you start? I asked, forcing enthusiasm. Next month. She took another step toward me. Unless I have a reason to stay. Our eyes locked, the implication hanging between us. I can't ask you to give up another opportunity, I whispered. Not for me. I'm not giving up anything, she countered. I'm choosing. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing what I want, not what looks right on paper. She reached for me then, her cold hands cradling my face with surprising warmth. And what I want is you, Hope Barnes. Whatever that means, however we figure it out. The rain drummed against the windows as her lips met mine, tasting of promise and possibility. In that moment, despite the uncertainty ahead, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I had found my home, and it wasn't a place at all. What if we combined our practices? Juliana suggested one evening, a week after I'd moved into her spare bedroom. We sat surrounded by takeout containers on her living room floor, my laptop open to yet another disappointing rental listing. I paused mid-bite. What do you mean? Touch therapy for autistic adults, she explained, eyes lighting with enthusiasm. A specialized center combining your expertise with my clinical background, something no one else is doing. The idea sparked immediate interest. You think there's enough demand? Are you kidding? My waiting list is 3 months long, and that's just for consultations. Add in your therapeutic approach. She grabbed my notepad, scribbling rapidly. We could create something revolutionary. Hope bloomed in my chest for the first time since receiving my eviction notice. But startup costs. There's the Innovation in Healthcare grant from Texas Medical, she interrupted. Deadline's next month. It's specifically for interdisciplinary approaches. We stayed up until dawn, imagining possibilities, drafting plans, researching funding options. By morning, our crazy idea had transformed into something that felt tantalizingly possible. Living together as friends becoming something more created a delicate dance. We maintained separate bedrooms, establishing boundaries while we figured out our professional partnership. But each night, our good nights lingered longer, our embraces grew more intimate, the space between us charged with unspoken promises. 2 weeks into our cohabitation, Juliana received another call from Dallas. They're offering more money, she said when she hung up, her expression conflicted. And housing. And a research assistant. My heart sank. It sounds perfect. It would mean leaving Lubbock. Leaving this. Her gesture encompassed our nascent plans, our shared space, us. Maybe... I hesitated, then forced myself to continue. Maybe you should consider it. 2 years isn't forever. Her eyes searched mine. You'd wait. For you? Yes. The truth of it surprised even me. That night, I tossed in my bed, imagining 2 years of video calls and occasional visits. Could what we'd barely begun survive that kind of distance? As dawn approached, I gave up on sleep and padded to the kitchen for tea. I found Juliana already there, hunched over her laptop. Couldn't sleep either? I asked, filling the kettle. She looked up, eyes red-rimmed but bright. I've been researching more grant opportunities. The Nexus Foundation has a community impact fund that might work for us. Juliana, it's 4 a.m. I know, but... She turned her screen toward me. Look at this. On the screen was a completed application for the Texas Medical Grant, our proposed center described in compelling detail. You did all this tonight? I had to know if it was viable, she said. If there was a real alternative to Dallas. I moved behind her, resting my hands on her shoulders. She leaned back into my touch, a small sigh escaping her. This could work, I murmured, scanning the document. We could actually do this. It won't be easy, she warned. We'd be starting from scratch. Nothing worth having comes easy. I brushed my lips against her hair, inhaling the faint scent of rosemary shampoo. She reached up, capturing one of my hands and bringing it to her lips. The simple gesture sent warmth cascading through me. Come help me finish this, she said, pulling me down beside her. We worked until morning light filtered through the kitchen blinds, shoulders touching, occasionally stopping to refill our mugs or share a thought. It felt like building something together, brick by brick. When exhaustion finally claimed us, we collapsed onto her couch, my head on her shoulder, her arm around my waist. We should sleep, she murmured against my hair. I agreed. Too comfortable to move. She shifted, pulling me closer. Your room or mine? The question hung in the air, weighted with meaning. I looked up to find her watching me, vulnerability and desire mingled in her gaze. Yours is closer, I whispered. We moved to her bedroom in silence, both aware of the threshold we were crossing. No urgent passion drove us this time, just bone-deep exhaustion and the simple need to be close. I borrowed a t-shirt, slipped under her covers, and felt the mattress dip as she joined me. In the quiet morning light, we curled toward each other like quotation marks, her forehead against mine, our breathing synchronizing. Her hand found mine between our bodies, fingers interlacing. "Is this okay?" she asked softly. "More than okay," I assured her, eyes already closing. I fell asleep that way, holding Juliana's hand, our business plan waiting on the laptop, dreams of both kinds taking shape in the gentle morning light. "We need a name," Juliana insisted, standing in the empty commercial space we'd just signed a lease on. 6 months had passed since that night we'd fallen asleep planning our future. Against considerable odds, we'd done it. Secured the Texas medical grant, found affordable space, and developed a business model that had experienced professionals in both fields taking notice. "Something better than Barnes Hall touch therapy," I agreed, my voice echoing in the bare room. She walked the perimeter, her footsteps tapping a thoughtful rhythm. "What about embracing connection?" I smiled, remembering the rainy day that had started everything. Perfect. Our center opening wasn't glamorous, just a small gathering of supporters, a few curious healthcare professionals, and several of our former clients eager for our combined approach. But seeing our names together on the door made my chest tighten with emotion. "Dr. Juliana Hall and Hope Barnes, therapeutic integration specialists," I read aloud, tracing the lettering with my finger. "Still can't believe we pulled this off." "I never doubted," Juliana said, slipping her arm around my waist. After months together, her touch still sent warmth cascading through me. We'd fallen into a partnership that felt both revolutionary and inevitable. Her clinical expertise guiding my intuitive approach, my hands-on techniques enhancing her theoretical frameworks. The waiting list for our services grew weekly as word spread about our success with adults on the spectrum and others struggling with touch aversion. "Dr. Hall?" A familiar voice interrupted our moment. We turned to find Marcus standing in the doorway, looking somewhat awkward but smiling genuinely. "Marcus," Juliana greeted him warmly. "I'm so glad you could make it." I tensed slightly, our complicated history still fresh despite the months that had passed. But Marcus approached with an extended hand and clear eyes. "Congratulations to you both," he said sincerely. "What you've created here is remarkable." "Thank you," I replied, surprised by the absence of awkwardness. "I actually came to share some news," he continued. "I've accepted a position at UCLA, leaving next month." "That's wonderful," Juliana exclaimed. "Their psychology department is exceptional. And I wanted you to meet someone," he added, gesturing toward the door where a petite woman with curly hair waited. "My fiancée Elena. For real this time." We exchanged introductions, and I found myself genuinely happy for him. Our paths had crossed at a complicated time, but it seemed we'd all found where we were meant to be. Later that evening, after locking up our new center, Juliana and I walked hand in hand through a light spring drizzle. The weather had turned unseasonably cool, and dark clouds gathered on the horizon. "Looks like a storm coming," I observed. "Reminds me of the day we met." Juliana squeezed my hand. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately. About how I was too stubborn to bring an umbrella. About how some of the best things in life come when you least expect them," she corrected. "When you're not prepared at all." We paused at a crosswalk, and Juliana suddenly turned to face me. "Do you remember what you told me about your work, that first day in the coffee shop? That I'm a professional hugger?" I laughed. "You said touch is a language," she recalled. "And that day, when our hands touched under the umbrella, I think you spoke to me in a way no one ever had before." My throat tightened with emotion. "Juliana." She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. The crosswalk signal changed, but neither of us moved. "I had this whole plan," she said, raindrops beginning to speckle her hair, dinner, candles, the works. "But standing here, in the rain where everything started." She opened the box to reveal a delicate silver ring set with a small emerald. "Hope Barnes, would you marry me? For real, no grants required, just because I love you more than I knew was possible?" Thunder rumbled in the distance as tears mixed with raindrops on my cheeks. 1 year ago, I'd been a professional hugger with an eviction notice and a desperate crush on a woman I barely knew. Now I stood before that same woman, marveling at how completely she'd changed my life. "Yes," I whispered, then louder. "Yes." She slipped the ring onto my finger with hands that trembled slightly. As the skies opened above us, I pulled her into my arms. No longer a therapeutic embrace, but one filled with promise and passion, and a future neither of us could have imagined that first rainy day. We kissed in the downpour, oblivious to thunder and lightning and passing cars, sealed in our private bubble of joy. Juliana Hall had once borrowed me an umbrella and accidentally stolen my heart. Now, as we embraced in the storm that had brought us full circle, I knew with absolute certainty that I never wanted it back.